Welcome back to the deep dive. So today we're looking at something pretty unusual.
Yeah, definitely outside our normal run of sources.
Right, excerpts from C.S. Lewis's The Screwtape Letters.
That's it. And this isn't, your standard analysis or report. It's framed as letters.
Letters from a devil.
A senior devil, Screwtape, writing to his nephew, Wormwood, giving him advice
Advice on what?
on tempting this one specific human. They just call him the patient.
Okay.
And Wormwood's job is basically to guide this patient towards, well, our Father below. It's all set during World War II, roughly.
So we're getting the tempter's playbook, kind of, seeing temptation from the other side.
Exactly. It's this infernal perspective on, well, everything. Human life, face, struggle, all focused on this one guy.
And our mission here in this deep dive is to unpack that. What are their strategies? What do they think they know about us, about humans?
And even their view of the divine, which is pretty twisted, as you'd expect.
It's like a shortcut to understanding this really unique viewpoint.
But we need to remember the framing, right?
Right.
Lewis presents this as the devil's view, and, the devil's a liar.
Right. So we're not saying this is the ultimate truth about reality.
No. But we are diving into what this source claims. What are the tactics, the worldview within these letters? What's the plan they lay out?
Got it. Understanding the strategy itself, not necessarily buying the whole metaphysical claim. Okay, let's dive in. What's the big picture goal for Screwtape and his side?
Well, Screwtape is brutally honest about it, at least to Wormwood. The main goal is what he calls absorption.
Absorption.
Yeah, taking over the human will. He talks about humans mostly as food.
Food. Wow.
Raw material. It's about increasing their own area of selfhood at the human's expense.
Wait.
Ultimately, getting that soul for our Father below. It's totally predatory.
Grim stuff. And the source says they have this kind of problem, a dilemma about whether humans believe in them or not.
Yeah, he calls it a cruel dilemma. It's tricky for them. If humans don't believe devils exist, they lose some tools, like direct terrorism, he calls it, obvious evil. And they don't get human magicians working for them openly.
Okay.
But if humans do believe in devils, then it's harder to push them towards materialism or skepticism.
Yeah.
Kind of wakes them up to the spiritual battle.
So the strategy now is hide, stay concealed.
Seems to be, yeah. Keep humans generally unaware they even exist.
And here's a weird detail you pointed out from the source. The image people have of devils actually helps them, the red tights thing.
Isn't that wild? Screwtape literally says that image, something comical, theatrical, helps them hide. If a human starts thinking maybe devils are real.
Just flash that silly image in their mind.
Exactly. And the human will likely just laugh it off, dismiss the whole idea as ridiculous.
So the cheesy Halloween costume is actually a strategic advantage. That's kind of mind-bending.
It really is. Anything that makes spiritual evil seem not serious, just, folklore or psychology, that works for them.
But they still hope for this thing they call the materialist magician. What's that?
Yes. This is like their masterpiece, potentially. A human who gets really into worshiping vague forces.
Forces, like what?
Screwtape mentions things like the life force, or sex, or certain aspects of psychoanalysis. Vague, impersonal energies.
Okay.
But the key is, this person denies that spirits, actual conscious supernatural beings, exist. So they're worshiping something, but not God, and not consciously devils either. It's this useful, deniable kind of spirituality.
That sounds subtle.
Very. He suggests if they could get enough humans like that, the end of the war will be in sight.
And throughout the letters, Screwtape complains about the enemy that's God, in his terms, having an abominable advantage. What is that advantage?
It's simple, really. The fact that the enemy actually became human. Screwtape, being a pure spirit, feels like he just can't truly get humans. He hasn't lived in a body, experienced temptation that way. So the enemy has this inside knowledge, this empathy that the devils just lack.
And there's this one big secret they absolutely cannot wrap their minds around.
Yeah, this is maybe the core insight we get from this infernal viewpoint. It's the enemy's love, with a capital L.
They just don't get it.
Screwtape literally calls it an impossibility. From their perspective, which is all about competition, absorbing others, self-interest, the idea that one being could genuinely love another distinct being.
And want what's best for them.
Right. Want the other's good as much as their own. It just doesn't compute. He suspects it must be some kind of trick, a cover for some deeper selfish motive he has for creating things.
And Screwtape says this misunderstanding, this inability to grasp love, was the reason for our father's quarrel with the enemy, the original split.
That's how he frames it. He says, our father demanded an explanation, and the enemy offered this cock and bull story about disinterested love, which was just totally unacceptable to them.
Wow.
And Screwtape even admits, kind of grudgingly, that the enemy's followers claim that if the devils ever truly understood what love means,
Then what?
the war would be over and we should re-enter heaven.
So the source is basically saying the entire cosmic conflict hinges on the devil's inability to understand genuine, self-giving love.
That's the picture it paints, yeah. They're constantly trying to find the real angle, the selfish motive behind it all.
They keep digging for data, building theories.
Right. Driven by this absolute conviction that their own realism, their cynical, everyone for themselves view has to be the truth, and the enemy's talk of love is just, claptrap.
And this ties into their idea of justice in hell, purely realistic.
Yeah, it's bottom line stuff. Bring us back food or be food yourself. Simple as that. Knowledge isn't good in itself. Screwtape finds it hateful and mawkish, but you need it for power.
And power is the only thing that counts.
In their world, yes, power is reality.
Okay, so that's a big picture philosophy. Let's shift to the specific tactics, so the nuts and bolts of tempting this patient. Where do they even start?
Well, one of the first things Screwtape advises is actually not to argue the patient out of his faith. Don't try to disprove Christianity with logic.
Really? Why not? That seems like Temptation 101.
Because, he says, argument wakes up the human's reason. And once it is awake, who can foresee the result?
Ah. Reason might actually lead them towards the enemy.
From the devil's point of view, absolutely. It's too risky. They don't want humans thinking too clearly about the big questions.
So instead of logic, they use jargon.
Exactly. Get the human judging ideas based on labels, not truth. Is it academic? Is it practical? Is it outworn or contemporary? Is it conventional or ruthless?
So don't argue if materialism is true. Just make it sound fashionable.
Make it sound strong, stark, courageous, the philosophy of the future. It's all about emotional appeal and trendiness, not, actual reasoned debate.
And that connects to another point. Their job isn't to teach, it's to fuddle.
Screwtape gets annoyed if Wormwood sounds like he's actually explaining anything. Do remember you were there to fuddle him. Confusion, distraction, those are the tools, not clarity.
And speaking of distraction, this focus on real life, what do they mean by that?
They mean the immediate flood of sensory stuff. The bus going past, the newsboy shouting, the toast burning, just the surface level, moment-to-moment physical experience.
And the idea is to use that noise to drown out deeper thoughts.
Pretty much. Keep the human mind fixated there on the immediate physical world so that anything deeper, faith, spiritual questions, universal truths, feels unreal by comparison. All that sort of thing, Screwtape says, meaning faith just couldn't be true when you're faced with the reality of catching the 8.5 bus.
And the trick is, never let the person stop and ask what real actually means in that sentence.
Exactly. Keep them trapped in the immediate, the sensory. Don't let them question the framework.
Okay, another tactic you mentioned, encouraging extremes.
Yeah, especially when times are chaotic, like during the war. Fan the flames of factionalism.
Any extreme.
He literally says all extremes, except extreme devotion to the enemy, are to be encouraged. So push people to the fringes, even within things like the church, stir up division over minor issues.
Which brings us to church going, if the patient has to go.
Oh, they've got a plan for that too. Encourage church shopping.
Like being a consumer.
Exactly. Turn the patient into a taster or connoisseur of different churches, different preachers, different music styles. Make them a critic, not a humble pupil there to learn or worship.
Focus on the sermon critiques, the music reviews.
And definitely exploit all those little differences, high church, low church, styles of service, what the vicar wears.
Things that aren't the main point.
Right. They're perfect ground for distraction, for feeling superior, for lacking charity. Screwtape loves how they've managed to make people forget the basic idea of just, yielding to others on non-essentials. Keeps everyone nicely divided.
They also push something called Christianity in a race. What's that?
That's about substituting real faith with faith that's only valued because it's attached to something else, something trendy or useful. Christianity in the crisis, Christianity the new psychology, Christianity and social justice. The idea is to get the human value in Christianity because it seems to help with the and part. Maybe it builds a better society, or it fits with a political view, or it makes them feel relevant.
So faith becomes a means to a worldly end.
Exactly. Not the end in itself. If they can manage that switch, they're winning.
Okay, this next one sounds very modern. The horror of the same old thing, this constant need for novelty.
Yeah, Screwtape claims this is pretty much their invention, this insatiable desire for the absolutely new all the time.
And why is that useful to them?
It's insidious. It makes simple, lasting pleasures seem boring because they aren't new. It ramps up craving, often costs money, and eventually pushes people towards forbidden stuff because the innocent pleasures feel stale.
He mentions it corrupts the arts, too.
Pushing artists towards constant, fresh, and still fresh excesses just to get noticed, to be new.
And this craving for novelty ties into pushing certain ways of thinking, like focusing on history or progress.
Precisely. Get humans asking, is this progressive? Is this where history is going? Does this fit the movement of our time? Instead of asking,
Is it true? Is it right? Is it wise?
exactly. Those historical questions are basically unanswerable, right? We don't know the future. But asking them keeps the human mind buzzing in this vacuum, as Screwtape puts it.
Will the devils slip in and do their work?
Yeah. And notice how they've swapped the neutral word unchanged for the negative word stagnant.
So anything traditional automatically sounds bad?
Right. It makes people suspicious of stability just because it isn't new. And it paints the future as this kind of promised land you have to strive towards, not just, the next moment that arrives for everyone.
Okay, let's move from those broader cultural things to the patient's inner life. Disappointment seems like a key tool, especially for new believers or when starting something new.
Screwtape calls it the anticlimax, that feeling when the initial buzz wears off.
Like starting a new project or even a relationship.
Yeah, or learning Greek because you loved Homer, then finding out it's mostly grammar drills. Or the reality of daily married life after the honeymoon phase. It's that shift from the exciting dream to the laborious doing.
And the source suggests the enemy, God, actually allows this dip, this dryness.
That's Screwtape's interpretation. He thinks the enemy lets it happen because he wants people who choose him freely, not just swept along by feelings. He wants them to stand up on their own legs, so to speak.
And if someone gets through that initial patch of dryness,
They become less dependent on emotion, Screwtape admits, and that makes them harder to tempt.
this sounds like what Lewis talks about elsewhere, the law of undulation, natural ups and downs.
Exactly, peaks and troughs. And those troughs, the times of feeling spiritually flat, bored, or dry, those are prime time for the devils.
Why?
Because the human is just kind of going through the motions, doing their duty, maybe, but the relish is gone. The joy isn't there.
But prayer during those times, that's actually what the enemy values most.
According to Screwtape's rather annoyed analysis, yes. Praying when you don't feel like it, when there's no emotional reward, purely out of intention to obey, that really impresses the enemy.
He says their cause is never more in danger.
Right. When a human, no longer desiring but still intending, keeps trying to do the enemy's will, even when the universe feels empty and still obeys, that's bad news for hell.
But the troughs are still good hunting ground for them.
Oh, absolutely. He calls them an excellent opportunity for all sensual temptations. When you feel drab and empty inside, resistance is lower.
And the kind of sensual temptation is different in a trough.
Screwtape claims trough sexuality is less likely to involve real love or affection. It's more easily twisted into perversions, less likely to have those generous and imaginative bits that can sometimes accompany peak experiences. It's more purely physical, often kind of joyless.
So using something like drink just to numb the feelings as an anodyne is better for them than encouraging celebratory drinking.
Much better, he says. It fits their favorite formula.
Which is?
An ever-increasing craving for an ever-diminishing pleasure. Get the soul. Give basically nothing satisfying in return. That, Screwtape says, is what really gladdens our Father's heart.
And they specifically target the person's thoughts about being in a trough, how they interpret that dryness.
Yes, the key is ignorance. Keep the human unaware that these undulations are normal. Make them think the dryness is permanent. Your faith was just a phase. It's over now.
Or if they're feeling down.
Push them away from experienced Christians who might explain it. Tell them to just rely on their own willpower, which will probably fail.
And if they're feeling okay, sort of complacent.
Encourage that. Tell them their early enthusiasm was a bit much. Promote moderation in all things. Screwtape loves that phrase.
Why?
Because a moderated religion, he says, is as good for us as no religion at all, and more amusing. Lukewarm is just fine for them.
Okay, let's talk prayer. They don't just want to stop it, they want to twist it if it happens.
Right. First prize is stopping the serious intention of praying altogether. especially for someone new to faith. Encourage that vague, drifting, mood-based thing, where you feel spiritual, but don't actually focus your will or mind. Think Coleridge, he says, who could talk beautifully about prayer, but maybe didn't do it much.
They also want people to forget they have bodies when they pray.
Humans tend to think prayer is purely mental or spiritual. Screwtape reminds Wormwood they're animals. Whatever their bodies do affects their souls. So posture matters. Kneeling isn't irrelevant.
And another big tactic, turn the focus inward, onto the self.
Yes. Keep them watching their own minds and trying to produce feelings there by the action of their own wills. Don't ask God for love. Try to manufacture a feeling of love. Don't ask for courage. Try to force yourself to feel brave.
And then judge the prayer by whether the feeling showed up.
Exactly. Which makes prayer seem useless if you're tired or sick or just not feeling it because the feeling wasn't produced.
What if the person does try to focus on God? They have this composite object trick.
Right. Since humans don't see God directly like angels or devils do, their idea of God in prayer is always, well, constructed, made up of images, ideas, feelings.
A composite.
Yeah. And Screwtape wants to keep them praying to that composite object, the thing they've built in their own head, instead of reaching through it to the actual person who made them.
They might even get the person busy trying to perfect that mental image.
Constantly fiddling with it, trying to correct and improve their picture of God. And they'll raise intellectual doubts about simple petitionary prayer. Asking for stuff.
Pushing the idea that only praise and communion is real prayer.
Dismissing the simple asking, even though the enemy seems to encourage it.
Humility, that's another virtue they try to mess with.
Yeah, Screwtape says virtues become less dangerous once the human is aware of having them.
Yeah.
And humility is especially vulnerable.
So, step one is pride about being humble.
Blah.
That look at me, I'm being humble feeling.
That's the classic trap.
Yeah.
But they also go deeper, corrupting the very idea of humility, making it mean having a low opinion of yourself, thinking you're untalented or worthless.
Even if it's not true, like getting a talented person to believe they're useless.
Exactly. Getting a pretty woman to believe she's ugly or a smart man to think he's a fool. It introduces dishonesty, making them value a false opinion over the actual truth about themselves.
So what's the enemy's version of humility, according to Screwtape?
It's not about false self-deprecation. It's more like self-forgetfulness, turning attention away from the self towards the enemy and towards neighbors.
And being grateful for your own talents.
Yes. Rejoicing in them honestly, just like you'd rejoice in someone else's talent or a beautiful sunset. A gratitude for all selves, including their own. It connects back to the enemy valuing uniqueness, wanting people to be more themselves, not less.
Wow, that's completely different from the common idea of humility as putting yourself down.
Totally flips it, yeah.
Okay, here's one that feels very real. Exploiting our sense that we own our time.
Screwtape loves this one. He calls it the curious assumption, my time is my own. That feeling of outrage when something unexpected happens, a visitor drops by, your spouse wants to chat, and it disrupts your plans for your time.
Like someone's stealing your property.
Exactly. Even though, as Screwtape points out, the assumption is absurd. Humans don't create time. They receive it moment by moment as a gift. And theoretically, their time belongs entirely to the enemy anyway.
But the trick is to keep that absurdity hidden.
Keep it silent, uninspected, and operative. Let that sense of ownership just simmer under the surface, causing resentment and frustration.
And this perhaps leads to the most famous idea from the book, the gradual slope. Small sins, distractions.
Right. Screwtape hammers this home. Nothing is very strong. They don't need big dramatic sins all the time. Little things often work better.
Like what kind of little things?
Getting sucked into reading junk mail or pointless online arguments. Just sitting through boring conversations without any real charity or engagement. Even just doing nothing at all for long periods. That dreary flickering of the mind, he calls it. Wasting time, basically.
The safest road to hell is the gradual one, the gentle slope, soft underfoot, without sudden turnings, without milestones, without signposts.
That's the chilling line. It's about slowly, almost imperceptibly, edging the person away from the light. Small compromise by small compromise.
Murder is no better than cards if cards can do the trick.
Exactly. Whatever works to slowly draw the soul away. The cumulative effect is what matters.
And linked to this, if a person does have a good impulse, like wanting to change or repent, the tactic is often just to stop them acting on it.
Yes. Let them think about it. Let them feel noble about planning it. Maybe even let them write about it or talk about it. Screwtape calls that sterilizing the seeds.
Don't let them actually do it.
Right, because active habits are strengthened by repetition, but passive ones are weakened. Feeling good about a future action you don't take actually makes you less likely to take it next time. It weakens the will.
Okay, shifting gears slightly. Relationships and social life. Annoyance seems like a big weapon, especially in close relationships, like with the patient's mother.
Oh yeah, building up that good, settled habit of mutual annoyance, daily pinpricks, using those little tones of voice, those specific facial expressions, get under the other person's skin, perfected over years.
And exploiting a double standard in arguments.
Definitely. Where you judge yourself by your good intentions and the literal words you used, I only said, but you judge the other person by their tone, their expression, what you assume their hidden motive was.
So both people feel totally justified and completely wronged.
Precisely. Screwtape finds it a delightful situation, keeps the resentment simmering nicely.
Worldly friends. Another danger zone.
Especially friends who are, rich, smart, maybe a bit cynical or skeptical. They play on vanity, social vanity, intellectual vanity, even sexual vanity.
How does it start?
Subtly, encouraging little betrayals first, a shared glance that mocks something Christian, laughing at the slightly off-color joke, adopting a tone that distances you from your beliefs. It puts the patient in a false position.
Pretending to be something they're not.
And humans, Screwtape notes, tend to turn into the thing they're pretending to be.
He mentions the word Puritanism is helpful here.
Hugely helpful, he says. It helps them rescue people from things like temperance or chastity by making any hesitation to join in seem old-fashioned, judgmental, or just uncool.
And if the person starts to see the conflict with these friends, there are subtler ways to keep them entangled.
Oh, yes. They might get the patient living two parallel lives, being pious with Christian friends and worldly with the others.
Or even worse.
Taking a kind of perverse pleasure in the inconsistency itself, feeling like a sophisticated, complete, balanced, complex man who can see all sides and isn't narrow-minded. Screwtape loves this one. Allows for constant betrayal while feeling smug.
And the final fallback. Keep seeing the friends, but justify it by saying you're trying to be a good influence.
Exactly. I have to keep up with them to do them good while joining in the cocktails and the jokes, making sure not to be priggish or intolerant. It's a great excuse for staying in a damaging environment.
Laughter. They even analyze laughter.
Oh, yeah. Screwtape breaks it down. There's joy, which comes from the enemy. They hate it. Fun, mostly harmless, promotes charity, not much use to them. The joke proper, based on incongruity, can be useful if it's cruel or obscene. And then flippancy.
And flippancy is the best one for them.
By far. It's economical, he says. Builds the finest armor plating against the enemy. Doesn't even require being witty.
How does it work?
You just train people to talk as if everything serious has already been exposed as a joke. Virtue, faith, courage. It's all treated with a sort of knowing, light dismissal. It deadens the intellect, he says, and crucially, it excites no affection. It's purely negative.
And it's used to make bad things acceptable.
Destroy shame. Make vice seem funny. Call cruelty a practical joke, or cowardice just being comical. The mind just skates over the serious reality because it's coated in this layer of jest.
Courtship. That's described as a dangerous time, too.
Prime time for sowing seeds of future misery, according to Screwtape. That initial enchantment of unsatisfied desire, that in-love feeling, makes people ignore or postpone dealing with real incompatibilities or problems.
Which the devils can then nurture in secret.
And make them chronic years down the line when the initial magic is worn off.
Then there's unselfishness. They twist that, too.
They substitute it for the enemy's actual goal, which is charity or love. They teach people to focus on the act of giving things up for the sake of appearing or feeling unselfish, rather than genuinely aiming for the other person's happiness.
It becomes about the gesture, not the outcome.
Right, and they exploit a gender difference here too, apparently.
How so?
He claims women often define unselfishness as actively taking trouble for others, while men often define it as passively not giving trouble or interfering.
Which means?
Each sex constantly sees the other as fundamentally selfish according to their own definition. It breeds resentment, a feeling of being hard done by, while both feel perfectly virtuous themselves. It encourages these elaborate self-conscious displays of unselfishness that often completely miss what the other person actually needs or wants.
Wow. Okay, finally on relationships. The patient gets a Christian girlfriend and they target her circle.
Yeah, Screwtape points out a common flaw he sees in tight-knit religious groups, this subtle, untroubled assumption that the outsiders, are really too stupid and ridiculous, a kind of intellectual or spiritual snobbery,
And they want the patient, the newcomer, to pick this up.
and exaggerate it. Turn it into proper spiritual pride. Make him feel he's finally finding his own level, that these are his sort of people.
Confusing social comfort with spiritual depth.
Exactly. And confusing the erotic enchantment from the girl with genuine holiness in the group. He starts feeling superior, thinking how different we Christians are, but secretly meaning how different my new cool set is. It plays right into that desire for belonging, for being part of an inner ring.
Okay, briefly on external stuff, like the war going on. Mixed bag for the devils.
Yeah. Suffering itself is, a plus for them. But war is risky. It can make people turn to the enemy. It can make them think about death, which disrupts comfortable worldliness. It can focus them on causes bigger than themselves. And Screwtape really dislikes people dying prepared.
So how do they try to use the war?
Try to push the patient to extremes. Make him a fanatic patriot full of hatred, or a fanatic pacifist full of resentment, depending on his type. The goal is always to make the cause, the politics, the movement the main thing, and faith just a tool to support that.
Make the world the end, faith the means.
If meetings, pamphlets, policies matter more to him than prayers and sacraments and charity, he is ours. That's the test.
Uncertainty about things like military service. That's useful too.
Oh, very useful. Maximum uncertainty, Screwtape says, fills the mind with anxieties, hopes, fears. Nothing like suspense and anxiety for barricading a human's mind against the enemy. Keeps them focused on what might happen, not on their present duty.
Which links to their whole strategy about time.
Yeah.
Humans obsessed with the future.
Exactly. The enemy, Screwtape says, wants humans focused on eternity and the present. Because the present is where time touches eternity, is where choices are made, grace is given, duty is done.
But the devils want us hag-ridden by the future.
Living for the future. Always chasing some future happiness, using the present moment, the actual gifts they're being given now, merely as fuel for fears or hopes about what's coming next. Never honest, nor kind, nor happy now, he says, just constantly sacrificing the present for a future that never arrives.
And despite the war, Screwtape actually wants the patient to survive it at this point.
Yes, because the patient is now a Christian, involved with this girl, potentially getting stronger. Dying now would be a loss for them. Time is their ally now.
Why?
The long, dull, monotonous years of middle-aged prosperity or middle-aged adversity are excellent campaigning weather. Perseverance over decades is hard for humans.
Prosperity makes you comfortable and worldly.
Knits you to the world, yeah. Makes you forget deeper things.
And adversity just wears you down.
Exactly, attrition. Screwtape thinks the young are often less afraid of death than the middle-aged, who have more attachments.
So real deep worldliness is a slow burn, helped by pride in being sensible or experienced.
And the best way to hook the young to the earth isn't necessarily vice, but getting them to believe they can build heaven on earth through politics, science, whatever, redirects all that idealistic energy.
What about courage and cowardice in war?
Screwtape admits they can't create virtue. Courage is just a liability for them because it's needed for all virtues when tested.
Right?
But making someone a coward is also risky.
Risky how?
Because the shock of seeing your own cowardice can lead to real self-knowledge, shame, repentance. Exactly what they don't want. War forces moral issues, which can be dangerous for them.
But hatred. Hatred is good, especially with fear.
Fear is just painful. But hatred has its pleasures. It's a compensation for fear, an anodyne for shame. The more you fear, the more you might hate. And hate is definitely a state they encourage.
And tempting someone to be a coward. How do they do that?
Encourage lots of elaborate precautions, which actually increases fear. Get them focused on hypothetical escape routes, imaginary lifelines, instead of the simple present duty. Build up these unconscious reservations.
So in the moment of crisis,
the act of cowardice happens almost automatically before they can think. And the act is what counts for hell, not just the feeling of fear.
during air raids, using fatigue.
Yeah. Feed false hopes the raid is almost over. Make the weariness seem unbearable just when relief might be coming. Get them to break or give in right at the last moment.
And finally, that emotional attack when seeing something horrific, like death or injury.
Make the person feel that this horror is the ultimate reality. This is what the world is really like. Make faith and happiness seem like childish fantasy, escapism.
Exploiting that word real.
Totally. Making it mean different things depending on the situation.
Oh, so?
When something good happens, real means the physical facts, and the goodness is just subjective feeling. When something bad happens, real means the spiritual horror, the despair, the disgust, and ignoring that is escapist.
So seeing gore is reality. but seeing happy kids is mere sentiment.
That's the double standard. Screwtape has this cynical line about humans accusing each other of wanting to eat the cake and have it, but thanks to the devils, they're often paying for the cake and not eating it.
Paying the price of experiencing the horror as real, but not getting the benefit of experiencing the goodness as real? That's bleak.
It is.
Okay, let's quickly flip it. What do these letters reveal about how the devils see the enemy, God, his ways?
Well, they see him relying more on the quiet work done during those troughs, those dry spells, than on big emotional peaks. They see him as someone who won't force belief. He woos, he invites, he wants free followers, sons, not slaves.
And he withdraws sometimes, his felt presence.
Screwtape thinks so, deliberately, to make humans learn to stand on their own legs, to act out of will, not just feeling. He's apparently pleased by prayer and dryness, by someone stumbling but still trying to walk towards him.
And he values uniqueness, puts an absurd value on the distinctness of each person.
Yeah, hates seeing them become copies or lose their individuality. And Screwtape notes, rather bitterly, that when humans give up their self-will to the enemy, he somehow gives them back their personality, makes them more themselves. He seems delighted by that willing sacrifice.
His presence feels different to them than to humans.
Radically different. To devils, it's like a blinding, suffocating fire, an asphyxiating cloud. To the saved human, apparently it's cool light, clarity, even the form of a man.
And his forgiveness.
Screwtape sees the patient, after death, understanding his sins even more clearly, yet still accepting forgiveness. Their own goal is always despair. To the enemy, Screwtape notes, despair itself is a worse sin than whatever caused it.
His view of time is also completely alien to them.
Right. He doesn't see things one after another like we do. He sees it all somehow in an unbounded now. Screwtape struggles with this, especially with free will. He uses the analogy, to watch a man doing something is not to make him do it.
And his world. It's full of simple pleasures they have to twist.
Yeah. Sleeping, eating, washing, basic stuff. Nothing is naturally on their side. They have to corrupt it. He also keeps humans from feeling, too, at home on Earth. And he doesn't give them much time. Most humans die young, Screwtape complains, limiting their chances.
But he wants them to live long lives.
Seems so. Some who resist temptation over the long haul. He creates a dangerous world, Screwtape thinks, precisely because it forces moral choices, brings things to a head.
And always back to the core mystery. His love for these hairless bipeds.
Vermin, he calls them. This love that gives back with one hand what it takes with the other. It's the absolute bedrock they cannot understand, the thing that, if they did understand it, would apparently end the whole conflict.
Which leads us finally to Screwtape's furious description of the patient's death. He lost him.
Totally enraged. The patient died at the worst possible moment for them, just when he was getting stronger, escaping traps, involved with a Christian girl. A complete loss.
And the death itself, from Screwtape's perspective, was liberation.
Sheer, instantaneous liberation. He uses metaphors of release. A scab falling off, getting out of diseased skin, taking off a filthy garment. The pain was like a tooth finally coming out. The nightmare was like waking up. Death wasn't the end.
And there was recognition.
As he died, the patient saw Screwtape, knew his influence, knew it was over. But he also saw them, presumably angels, and instantly knew he'd always known them, that they'd been there all along. So it was you all the time, Screwtape imagines him realizing.
Past feelings explained, a central music recovered. Recognition brought freedom.
And then he saw the enemy. Screwtape can barely believe it, that this animal could look on him. But what's fire and suffocation to the devil was cool light and clarity to the human. Even the patient's self-awareness of sin wasn't despair, but some kind of clear-sighted humility.
He embraces it all, wouldn't go back.
No. Earthly stuff, even earthly virtue, seems like half-nauseous attractions of a rattled harlot in comparison. He's entered a world of transfinite values where all hell's calculations mean nothing. Screwtape is left just clinging to his belief that their cynical realism must win eventually.
Wow. Okay, so this whole deep dive into Screwtape, it's given us this really unique inside-out view of temptation. The strategies against belief, against our inner lives, our relationships, even how they use external events.
Yeah, and really highlighted the subtlety, hasn't it? The gradual slope, the small stuff, twisting everyday things like disappointment or novelty or even unselfishness, and just seeing their completely baffled, frustrated perspective on the enemy's love.
So for you listening, what's the takeaway from this infernal viewpoint? Maybe it's just a new awareness, spotting those subtle tactics, recognizing when jargon is replacing truth or when extremes are being pushed or how small annoyances get weaponized.
Or how virtues like humility can be faked, or how worrying about the future stops you living now. It paints a vivid picture of how quietly you can drift, not through some big dramatic fall, but just through distraction and distorted thinking.
Seeing the difference between something feeling strong or progressive versus being, actually true or good.
Right.
This source really frames the enemy's love as the ultimate reality that the devils just cannot compute. And it shows how easily we humans can mistake other things, feelings, social status, future plans for what's really valuable, missing the actuality of the present, the quiet reality of virtue.
So maybe the toughest deep dive isn't always into complex data or sources.
Yeah.
Maybe it's into understanding what's truly real in our own present moment and figuring out what has genuine value beyond all the calculations and manipulations, whether they're human or infernal. What part of this devil's eye view of us hits you the hardest?